Ready?
Diane, I'm just going to start out asking you a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and what that was like.
I was born in Belgium after the war. I grew up in Belgium. I was very different than everybody else because I had black curly hair when everybody was blonde. I had a very nice childhood, even though I did not particularly like to be a child. Then I went to boarding schools in Switzerland, in England, in Spain. And then I worked briefly. I went to University in Geneva. I met who was going to be my husband, worked briefly, and came to New York.
You talk about your mother in your book and the impact that she's had on your life. Can you tell us a little bit about her life, and what are the most important things you learned from her?
Well, my mother was an extraordinary woman. She was very, very tiny and yet very, very, very strong. When she was 20, she got arrested and went to the concentration camps. She was in Auschwitz and in Ravensbrück, and when she survived, clearly, and she weighed 49 pounds when she came back, and which was less than her bones were supposed to be. And she gained her health back, or her weight back. My father, she was engaged to my father. He came back to Belgium. They got married. And the doctor said, I think it's better that you don't have a child, wait about a few years because you're too weak. And of course I was born very quickly after. So my birth was a miracle. And my mother made me very independent and strong. And the most important thing she taught me is that fear is not an option.
So when you were a teenager, what did you want to be?
I never knew what I wanted to do, but I knew the kind of woman I wanted to be. I wanted to be an independent woman, a woman who could pay for her bills, a woman who can run her own life. And I became that woman.
And what was it like when you came to America in the 70s? Can you talk about your early life here?
I came to New York. I was 22 years old. I was young princess. I had married a beautiful, good-looking prince. Life was nice. It was nice to be young in the 70s. It was a good moment to be young. I was young somewhere between the pill and AIDS. It was a very nice moment. Everything in New York was very cheap. New York was actually bankrupt, and so everything was cheap, and there was a lot of creative people. We thought we invented freedom. It was nice. I had 2 children immediately, and I started to work.
What was the genesis of your career as a fashion designer? How did that start for you?
Well, as I told you, I really wanted to be independent, and I was working in Italy for a major fashion industrialist. And he had a printing plant, and he had a plant where he made jersey fabric. And I didn't think I was interning there. I didn't think I was doing much, but actually I learned everything there. And my boyfriend was in America, and he came and visited me in Rome, and we got engaged. And soon after, he went back to America, and I realized that I was not only engaged, I was also pregnant. And so I had to get married faster than I expected. And as a result, I wanted so much to be independent. So I went to see the man that I worked for, and I said, listen, I'm moving to America, and I am going to live there, and I'm going to get married and have a child. But I really, really want to work. So would you allow me to make a few samples from your factory? And I'm going to try to sell them in America. And that's what I did.
In 1972, you revolutionized women's fashion. What did you create and why, and what was your inspiration for that design?
Well, I started with little jersey dresses, very simple little jersey dresses, t-shirt dresses, shirt dresses. And then there was a little wrap top. And the little wrap top went with a skirt. And one day I just thought, it would be nice to make that top into a dress. And I did. Little did I know that this was going to be the key of my fortune and the key of everything, and that I was to make millions of them.
Do you remember the initial reaction when it first was released?
Yes, it was immediately successful, immediately.
What was it like for you to be one of the principal women designers at that time?
It was really fun. I mean, it was 1976 was a big year for me. I was on the cover of Newsweek, I was on the cover of Interview, I was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I was 29 years old. And it was also, I remember, it was the year where the primaries, the Democratic primaries, were in New York City. And I remember as my friend Jerry Brown was counting his votes, I was counting my dresses, and I think I had more dresses than he had votes. So Carter became president.
So can you talk about your first advertising slogan, "Feel like a woman, wear a dress," and how that fit in with what was happening at that time period?
At the time, it was my very, very first dress. I took a small ad in Women's Wear, so I asked a friend of mine to take a picture of me in that dress, and I was sitting on a white cube, and when I saw the picture, the cube was too big and too white, so I said, oh, I should write something on that cube. And I promise you, without thinking, I wrote, "Feel like a woman, wear a dress." And that picture and that phrase stayed with me forever. As a matter of fact, that very same dress, I reissue vintage prints and every year, and that very same first dress that I wore is the dress that Michelle Obama chose for her Christmas card, first Christmas card as the First Lady. So that's pretty amazing.
I want to talk about the design in terms of the workplace and what was going on in the women's movement at that time. Was the dress an embrace of feminism when women were wanting the choice not to wear a dress? How did it fit, and who wore it?
Everybody wore it, really. I mean, you're talking about feminism. I remember Gloria Steinem wearing it. I mean, a lot of people wore it, but they weren't all feminists. But it was very much part of a movement of being a woman and enjoying being a woman. And so I was, I was always a little bit of a feminist.
How did you define that?
I mean, a little bit. I am a feminist.
How do you define that?
I think a feminist is a woman who believes that in her rights as a woman, and applies them and makes sure that other people do.
You made one of the statements. You think it's possible to be feminist and feminine.
Yes, I do. I mean, it doesn't mean that if you're a feminist, you have to look like a truck driver. I mean, Gloria Steinem, once again, is the perfect example of that.
What was the impact of the dress on the quantitatively on your business? What happened with the financial success of the business?
Well, it grew very, very quickly. I wasn't really maybe that equipped, and I had a manufacturer who wanted to make more and more, and salesmen who wanted to sell more and more. So at one point we got saturated. And so, I mean, when you grow so fast and when you live such a big, huge success, you always have the reverse, and some things, I mean, it doesn't always go up. It goes up, it goes down, a lot of things happen.
Was there a moment when you said to yourself, oh my gosh, this is huge?
Yes, the moment that I said, oh my God, all of a sudden I have, everything I touched went to gold, and whatever I made sold, and all of a sudden one day I'm stuck with $4 million of inventory and that nobody wants anymore. Yeah, that was pretty scary.
Did you realize it would be a design that would be around for decades, or did that surprise you?
No, I had no idea. I mean, it was major what happened to me the first time because I lived an American dream. But to me, it's much more amazing to see that 37 years later, that dress is still relevant and still worn by very young women. That, to me, is unbelievable because it just has never happened to a dress before.
You've always been a hands-on promoter and marketer of your line. Can you talk about your experience in the dressing rooms with the women and what they said to you and what you felt from them?
Well, you know, I was everything when I started. I design, I go to the factory, I make it. I mean, I didn't actually sew it, but I mean, I was sold it, and then I would go to stores and promote it and see it on women and go inside the fitting room and put it on. So it was all of it, you know, and what was amazing is that as I was becoming the woman I wanted to be, I was making other women be that woman. And that was pretty amazing, and that was a great adventure. And so I lived my adventure very openly, and I think that my honesty and my not holding anything on what was going on in my life as a woman, as a mother, as a single woman, all of that. I think that established more and more dialogue with women, and then I got older, and now of course I'm in the fall of my life, and I'm a grandmother, so now it's much more normal, so to speak, to get advice and to be an inspiration. That comes with age and with experience, and that's very nice. And today I realize that my mission in life, whether it is through my work, through mentoring, or through philanthropy, is all one. It's to empower women.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the DVF brand and the way you've always been intrinsically connected to it? What role did your appearance play in the success in the marketplace?
You know, you don't think that way. I mean, it's not like you think, at first it was me, and I made clothes that I thought looked right, and of course as a woman I would wear the clothes, so it became more and more me, and then I would go in ads, and then when I didn't go in ads, people wanted me to go in ads, and I got too old, but still they want me to be in ads, and so they use all the ads. I mean, it's been a strange experience, and but I think it is because I speak frankly, and therefore I don't hold back, and as I speak frankly, other people relate to it, and all women are the same. It doesn't matter where you're from. In the intimacy of a fitting room, or just in the intimacy of a room, if you're alone with a woman, we are all the same. And I think that I understand that, and I learned how to become confident, and to a certain degree I sell confidence. My clothes make the woman more confident. Everything I do and that's what I stand for.
Going back to in your early 20s, you were married to a prince, you didn't have to work, and yet you tenaciously pursued this career. Can you talk about your own ambition, and was that something you were consciously going after as high-level success?
I always wanted to be independent. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, and I have to be independent. I am still independent, and I don't know. If I go to the doctor, I like to go to the doctor alone. You know, I have a very good relationship with myself, and that's what gives me my first strength. And then, of course, my family and the people I love. But if I lose myself, then I would lose everything. So I have to be independent, and to be financially independent is part of being independent. And I would say to every woman in the world, I would say it's important for a woman to have children, but it is equally important for a woman to have an identity outside her family.
What did your husband at the time think about you working?
My husband at the time he helped me a lot at the beginning, and he really encouraged me. And then as I became more successful, it was harder maybe for him a little bit. And we separated, but in very good way, and we stayed friends until he died.
Polls show that many women won't admit to their own ambition. Do you think women avoid power, or they're afraid to? Ambition is a dirty word for women.
I don't know. Ambition could be looked at it in a negative way, and it could be looked at in a good way. I don't know that it's ambition that drove me. in as much as making things happen, you know. Have an idea, make it happen. My granddaughter, one of my granddaughters asked me the other day, she said, what is your favorite thing about your job? And because it was her who asked me, I paused and I thought about it, and then I said, well, I like to have ideas and make them happen.
So just going back a little to, you said at the point where your inventory maxed out, there was a lull, and then I would like you to just touch on that and then go into when you made your comeback and what that was like for you.
Well, I saw at some point in 1983, I sold my company. I lost control. My children went to boarding school. It was a different time of my life, so I decided to go back to Paris, to Europe. I was in Paris for 5 years. I had a love affair there. I started a publishing house there. And then after 5 years, I missed America, and I came back, and I missed my work, and that was the hardest time. That because my brand, I always joke that I had 3 children, a son, a daughter, and a brand. The son and the daughter were in college, and they were doing really well and great, and the brand had disappeared. It was just awful. It was in the hands of lots of people. It had lost all its point of view. It meant nothing, and that was really hard for me. And I tried to kind of get it back, or the people who had the name, tried to motivate them, and nobody wanted to hear from me. To a point, I actually got cancer in my tongue, and I think it's because I just couldn't express myself. And gradually, I got the name back, and then about 12 years ago, I started again. And the reason I started again is because I realized that young women, young girls, hip girls, models and actresses were buying the old dresses and in the vintage shops. And I thought, you know what, I should go back, and I did.
So now the dress has become part of a major collection.
The dress
museum.
is now much more than a dress. I mean, so that was my second period, comeback hit. And now, I mean, it's more than a dress, clearly. We have a huge collection, accessories, handbags, scarves, shoes. I'm launching a fragrance now. So home, lots of different things. Stores all over the world. And so now I feel like this year or last year I started my third period, and that is women business.
I wanted to talk about the Smithsonian Institute. Did a wrap as part of a...
Yes,
Do you remember what you heard about that and what you thought?
To tell you the truth, I think that when the Smithsonian asked me for the first dress, I barely knew what the Smithsonian was. So I'm not sure I chose the best dress to give them.
You've said that you've lived a man's life in a woman's body. Just wanted you to comment on that.
I always said that I wanted to live a man's life in a woman's body. And that, again, you know, means just be independent and have the life that, you know, I wanted to have.
In 2009, there was a Time Rockefeller Foundation survey on women, and it found that as women have gained more freedom, more economic power, they've become less happy. So as their expectations for their careers and their ability to balance work and personal lives have soared, so too has the disappointment if their expectations aren't met. What are your thoughts on the gains that women have made since the 60s and the realization that many women are now feeling that having it all is tough, if not seemingly impossible?
I really will repeat it again. I think women should have children. I think women should have an identity outside the home. I absolutely believe that more and more. I think that we should not think of sacrifice. I mean, in this office, we're 97% women. We started 12 years ago. I think we have had about 30 babies. They come, they have the babies, they come back. Everybody's happy. Some have babies on their own. I think it is, you know, people often ask me and say, well, you know, how can you combine the husband, the children, and the work? And I always say that the work and the children are okay. The hardest thing is the husband.
What have you tried to instill in your own daughter in terms of gender roles and how that plays out in the work-family balance?
I was raised in a way that my mother always thought to be a woman was a superior thing, not an inferior. So when she referred to men, she used to say, "Oh, les pauvres," poor one. So we don't have, in my family, as it regards to gender, we certainly don't feel inferior by being girls.
What are your thoughts on advertising in the fashion industry and the image of models' bodies and the ideals that they encourage women to aspire to? Do you think it's changed since you got involved?
What I deplore in what is happening now in women's role is those housewives of New Jersey, housewives of Miami. I mean, not them, but what I feel is somehow going back is giving an example to young girls that the secret of happiness is how much Botox you had, or or how much clothes. It's all very materialistic, and that is something that I think is unfortunate. As far as being thin, being too thin, I deplore that too. I mean, but it's all linked to the same thing. It's not about what you look like, but it's about who you are and what your character is. And by the way, if you have character, you will somehow have a healthy life, and therefore you won't get out of shape either way, So I think it's very important to have a discipline. I think the most important thing in life is the relationship you have with yourself. I think the earlier you learn how to count on yourself, the better off you are, because you can't be happy with anyone if you're not happy with yourself.
What about Madonna and many young women who've asserted their right to be sexy? Do you think women can use their sexuality for empowerment?
Absolutely. Women should use their sexuality. Women should use their legs. We have lots of advantages. I mean, we can wear makeup, we can wear clothes, we can show our legs, we could charm. Lots of things that we can do. On the other side, we have our period every month, and we stop having children after a certain age. So, men and women are two different animals completely, and they have different ingredients.
You've talked about a woman's power to save the world. Do you think there's a difference when women lead versus men?
Strangely enough, I think women are more pragmatic. I have never met a woman who is not strong. They don't exist. But sometimes they don't show their strength. It's a brother, it's a father, it's a relationships, it's a religion, or it's themselves. They're just insecure. And then a tragedy happens. And all of a sudden, insecurity is gone, and the woman's strength comes out. So it may as well come out before the tragedy.
What do you think is the biggest challenge still ahead for the next generation of women?
I think the most important for women today is try not to regress. I think women are strong, and so you don't have to throw it in people's faces. You just have to be confident and just go for it and be a woman. Never forget to be a woman.
Did you ever read The Feminine Mystique? Did you ever march for women's rights? What do you think of Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan?
Okay, I love Gloria Steinem, and I just saw last week the documentary on her, and it reminded me how much work she has done. She was an extraordinary woman. So was Betty Friedan, so was Bella Abzug, so were so many women. I have so much respect for women. There's so many women that I respect. I'm very involved with an organization called Vital Voices, which really helps women leaders all over the world. But those leaders sometimes is the tiny little leaders in this tiny little community. And every time I meet these women, I am always so humbled by them, because they do so much. And whether it is Somali mom who was practically born in a brothel and who now has orphanages and schools. these women who had so much against them and not only survived themselves but helped others to survive, that is amazingly inspiring.
Hillary Clinton's candidacy.
Hillary Clinton is someone that I admire so much. I admire her as a woman, as a mother, as an advocate, because what she is the most is an advocate. And she always fights for the good cause. She fights very much for women. I hoped that she would be president, but I think she did an amazing job as a Secretary of State. I don't know what she will do next, but I know that if she decided to work for women, I would work very hard for her.
You've mentioned so many times that you were so determined to be independent from the time that you were a little girl, and I just wonder where that came from.
I think the fact that my mother was a prisoner in the worst way and refused to be a victim, I think that had to do with it. I think that my mother really, I think she put that in my mind, be independent. But I'm the same, I was the same with my daughter and my granddaughters. That is the first thing, is to be independent, yeah. It's freedom.
I just want to talk about the dress a little bit more, the wrap dress, because before that, women, particularly working women, weren't really even wearing dresses to work. So I'm wondering if you can just paint a picture.
I don't think that it's true that women didn't wear dresses to work. I remember seeing those movies in the, those early American movies, and for me as a European little girl, women were working. You had working girls and working women in America, and they were wearing suits and things like that. It's when I first started, women were wearing a lot of pants and a lot of very hard clothes, and my clothes was very soft and all of a sudden revealed the body, and I think that's what made it successful. So also it was so comfortable.
The career started to be successful. Your husband at that time had issues with it, and I just wonder if you can talk to us a little bit more about that. How did they come up, and what do you think was happening?
No, I think we mentioned that. I said that, at first he was very helpful, and then I became very successful, and it was harder for him to accept it, and we separated. That was that.
What do you think was happening with him? Why was it
Well,
happening?
I don't know. It didn't, listen, I see even women who work here, often the problems when they become successful, there's always an adjustment moment with a husband. It's very rare. I now have a husband who absolutely has no problem with my success, but it often is the case. And you just, as a woman, have to learn how to be strong and seductive.
Do you want to talk a little bit about CFDA and your role there, and what your goals are in terms of your role in that organization?
Well, as I'm a president of the CFDA, which is the Council of Fashion and Design of America, and the first thing I wanted to do is it's a group of designers. We're 500 plus designers. And I wanted very much to make it a family. And it's about the successful one. It's about to help the ones who need help. And we are a family, and together we are more powerful than separate. But also we do a lot of work. We do a lot of work in Washington for copyright, for protection. We started a fashion program in the first time in Fordham Law School. We are involved in raising money sometimes for when disasters happen. And most of all, we mentor young designers. And so we do a lot, and it's really fun.
What's the one piece of advice you would give to a young woman on building a career and pursuing your dreams?
I think pursuing your dreams is the most important thing. You should always pursue your dream. But before pursuing your dreams, you have to crystallize and clarify and understand what your dream is. And that is the hardest thing. To identify what you want, to that is the hardest thing. Once you know and you see, then execution is easy, or easier.
A piece of advice to a young woman on relationships, and I mean like romantic relationships, as you go through your life's 20s, 30s, 40s.
The most important relationship in life is the relationship you have with yourself first. If you keep that good and healthy, then you can have great relationship with other people. And life is a journey, you know, a journey that changes landscapes, and some passengers come in, some people leave, some passengers may stay with you all their lives. But no matter what happens, you know that you always are with yourself.
Accomplishment you're most proud of?
I think what I'm most proud of is my family, is my children and now my grandchildren. I think that's my best work.
What was your very first paying job?
My first paying job, I was still at university, and at night I was a receptionist.
3 adjectives best describe you.
I think loving, I think generous, I think, and curious.
And what person that you've never met has had the biggest influence on your life?
And I could be very frivolous, and I can say that I never met Marlene Dietrich, but I think she's so beautiful. And then I could be a little deeper and said that I never met Mother Teresa, but I thought she was so inspiring.